my microphone wasn't on that whole time. Even when you get good at live streaming, which I would not say that I necessarily am, there's always an opportunity to make a mistake. And so happily, I've made a mistake. Hopefully, that is my only mistake for the whole month of October doing these live streams. I don't even know why this microphone was muted. What the use case for that was, but oopsie, my bad. What I was saying at the start, as a quick recap, is first off, welcome to the stream. Obviously, it's Halloween, so we got Halloween stuff going on for this month, and I'm planning to do a number of live streams, maybe like once a week on Thursday, for this channel, and just talk about photography. Get to have a moment of chatting with everyone about any photography news coming out, things that you guys are working on. Photographers that you really enjoy, like anything and everything. And if you're live, feel free to throw out questions that you have, thoughts, whatever it may be, join the conversation. And if you're watching after the live is over, then I encourage you to still put your comments into chat and or rather into the comments section, and that'll be something that I'll go back and read and respond to everyone. So still can participate even if you don't watch it live. But yeah, that's the kickoff of the stream. And there were a couple of things I wanted to talk about on the stream. The first is an announcement that I got my photo book sent to print, and supposedly it is already printed, boxed up, and set out for shipping. So I'm really excited about that. I know that's something I've talked about for a while on this channel, and that was a goal that I originally had probably in like 2022, but definitely in 2023. I remember making that like one of my goals for the channel and for that year personally was to do a photo book. But what I realized at the time was that I didn't really have enough material of any one thing that I was doing to then be able to, have that as a full series in a book. So it's like, I've got the carnival stuff, all the carnival long exposures, which are really exciting. I would love to do a book on that at some point. But there's not quite enough material there yet for a full book. And I had the candy art stuff, but similarly, it wasn't quite enough like really truly good photographs there at the time. And I was doing like a portrait series that I'm going to be honest, I was lost on. I had some really cool shots that I did, but I constantly kept reviewing those photographs and thinking, what is this series? Like, what am I actually doing in this portrait session that I'm putting on? And, occasionally, because I would do like a batch, it was all shot on film, medium format. And so I would do usually like 3 or so people per session. And sometimes people would say like, oh, what's the series on? Like, what is the goal? And it's like, I found it was too hard to articulate what I was trying to do outside of stating, facts like, oh, I'm shooting on film, it's medium format, I'm going to, edit the background of these shots. Like, okay, cool. Like these are all like the gear that I'm going to be using and some of the techniques I might employ, but this isn't necessarily really what the series is about. And I originally said, oh, it's going to be on fashion or whatever. And then it was like, is it really on fashion? I don't think it is. So anyway, long story short, that was a time where it was like, I want to do this book. I just don't have enough material in any one outlet to be able to really put together a good book. And so in 2024, this year, I decided I'm not going to do the portrait series. I'm not going to do the carnival long exposures unless something pops up that I can go quickly do. But I'm going to focus all my effort on the candy art series and really build up a portfolio of images in that series that then when I go on to do the book, I've actually got a wealth of images to choose from, and I can be picky about what actually goes into the book. So that was the goal, and exciting to be able to accomplish that and have a book that's basically done. I'm excited for it. I did everything myself. I originally did not intend to do that. I wanted to partner with someone who's skilled in graphic design and have them like look over my images and have us, sort of pick out images together. And then ultimately they would design the book. And I just never could find a graphic designer who either I could afford or who was like communicative. I don't know. It was a kind of a weird, a little bit surprising experience, but that's how it goes sometimes. But that kind of forced me into doing everything myself on the book in terms of the design of it, which was, as I anticipated, an absolute nightmare. It was not fun to do, but I did it, and we got a book out of it. And so there's maybe a little bit of satisfaction to that standpoint of like, okay, well, at least I did it all myself, for better or for worse. It's just the first book. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the last one. So I haven't gotten the book yet. I'm equal parts excited and equal parts nervous to receive the book and actually see it. Like if it comes out really good, I'll be very happy and I'll be very impressed with myself. If it doesn't come out looking good, I will spiral into a deep depression. Some of that is probably true, but no, I think it'll be a learning experience. Hopefully it comes out good, because otherwise that's money that just went down the drain, and then I'm kind of like back to square one a little bit. So hopefully that won't be the case. But yeah, I'm excited for that to come in. I'll have more information about that once it becomes something that's physically in my hands and I can verify that it looks at least halfway decent. Then I'll start to look at how I can get that out there to everybody. So that was something I was really excited about, and what I'm looking forward to hopefully in the next couple of weeks getting my hands on. A big part of why I printed that book was also in an effort to kind of have something tangible at this gallery that I'm doing in January, that, anyone who's going to the gallery and they like the art, they want to be supportive, but they, maybe don't want to buy a actual piece off the wall, then I would have this book that someone could buy. So that was like a big part, is like this is a accessory piece to the gallery event. And I kind of wanted to talk about gallery submissions, because I feel like there is some really good resources online, but equally there isn't a whole lot of good resources online, especially when you're talking about photographs. A lot of it is, I feel like, geared towards general art, like painting, sculpture, whatever it may be. And so I kind of wanted to talk just briefly about my experience in submitting to galleries. And maybe that's something that could be valuable to some of you, because I know in talking with you guys in the comment section, or sometimes you guys will email me, you'll talk about potentially wanting to do a showing, or some of you have even started to do a showing, which is really cool. But I think I didn't submit to stuff for a long time because I kept thinking, well, I need to have this beautifully finished product. I need to have everything framed and ready to go and all this material prepared, and then I'll submit to the gallery. And all that really did, I mean, it's a great thought. I'm sure there are some people out there who maybe are successful in doing that. But for me, really all it did was serve to make me not submit to anything ever. Because it's like, how do you really prepare for something you haven't even submitted to? And then, that's just a motivation killer. So I think if you're doing photography and you want to start getting your work out there, I think the idea that once I take a certain number of photos, or once I get some stuff framed, then I'll start submitting to galleries, or I'll start going around and seeing if a coffee shop will hold my work. Like, that's not necessarily the best way to go about it, I think. It's great if you already have those materials prepared, because it makes it a little easier, but I think that really can serve to slow you down and make you never submit to a gallery, or never put your work in a coffee shop, or whatever it may be, get something printed, because you're waiting for you to have your act together before you take that next step. And sometimes I think you just got to take the next step. Sometimes you just got to put yourself out there. And with things like galleries, where you're writing out a submission and you're sending in that submission, that's kind of a perfect way to get your foot out there, because you're probably going to get rejected from a number of them. But even if you do, you'll already have gained a ton of experience, because a lot of galleries, they want you to submit, an artist statement, and they want you to submit some photographs, and they want you to submit, this and that. And you probably have none of that prepared, other than maybe the photographs. And that's the boat that I was in. I don't have an artist statement. An artist CV, like, you have to essentially have a resume of all the past works that you've done. And it's like, well, if this is the first thing I've submitted to, I don't think I have any other work that I can do. So it's like, how do you address that problem? And going in and just beginning that process forces you to say, okay, well, what are these photographs about? What artist statement can I put together? Because here's the thing, you can reuse that artist statement for all the other things that you submit to. And so then there's, the other element, which is, okay, I have an artist statement, but I don't have an artist CV. And maybe I have a few things that I can put on that CV, or maybe I have truly nothing to put on a CV. Okay, how do I address that? And just to get that first gallery submission out there, you already have to tackle and solve a few problems. The artist CV, even if you have already done a few things that you can put on an artist CV, you still got to make the artist CV. You still got to type it up and have it ready to go. You still got to type out your artist statement. You still have to, go in and prepare which images you want to submit, and a bio about yourself. And so once you've done that, you kind of now have those materials prepared where you can then submit to the next thing. Now, not every single gallery submission requires the exact same field. So of course there will be some variances, but like the biggest things are now handled. And that makes that next stage easy to do, which is just to go in and submit, and then start finding other things to submit to. There's a few different websites that you can go to that just essentially collect open calls or opportunities to submit to galleries, and you can literally just scroll through or search through and find galleries that you want to submit to. There's plenty of stuff out there that costs $0 to fill a submission form out for. And then there's stuff that, yeah, sure, you might have to pay to submit to. But getting that initial practice in on a few of those that maybe cost you nothing in order to submit is a great opportunity. Even if you don't think that maybe you have the perfect series yet, just getting those initial submissions done, I think are really uplifting to your motivation to continue to do it. And you'd be surprised at the potential opportunity that you do get accepted into something. And I think as long as you're not overextending yourself, if you have 5 good images, don't tell them you have 18 good images. Just say, well, I've got 5 pieces for the showing, and then show those 5 pieces. And you can go out and get cheap frames that look fairly convincing as a decent frame. You know, it's not the route that I went. I went overkill with like building all the frames, or rather assembling all the frames myself, and like custom jobs, painting frames, things like that. In hindsight, it was way too much work. I should have taken this first one a little bit lighter, but I didn't. I went overkill. You don't have to do that. You can just go to the store, pick up 5 frames, and you're done. You're good to go. So, you know, I think that's a really valuable thing that I would say to anyone who's actually like interested in not just doing photography, not just posting images on Instagram or wherever you're posting them, but like actually getting work printed, framed, and hung somewhere that is not your own home. The best start is to just start doing it. Just start submitting. You know, if you don't have anything printed yet, just go into the coffee shop that you're thinking about, or the store that you're thinking about that shows artists' work, and go in there and say, hey, here's images I have. Show them the images on your phone. You know, maybe don't show them the Instagram page per se, but like just pull up the actual image on your phone and show it to them. Like, hey, would you be interested in hanging my work here? Worst they're going to say is, no, we're not interested. You know, and it's like, okay, was that because it was on a phone and I hadn't printed it out? Could be, maybe. But if it's something they're actually interested in and it's good, showing it to them on a phone is still going to get you a yes as much as having a printed and framed image would. And then even if you feel more comfortable having a physical item there, you could very easily go print the image, frame it, bring it with you and say, hey, you know, this is my work. Can I show it here? I've got more like this. You don't have to show them every single thing that you've shot, but show them that one really good piece and have that be framed so it's low in cost because it's just the one piece. And once they say yes, then you're willing to go out and spend more to frame the other images that you have. But, you know, when I did my submission, I hadn't framed anything outside of just my own personal stuff that I framed in my home. So, I mean, I could have maybe brought stuff like that to the table. But what I did was I literally just uploaded images, the actual image file. So nothing was framed, nothing was prepared. It was all just the PNG or rather the JPEG files from my computer. And, you know, on the actual submission form, they do ask like, what are the dimensions of this, you know, image or this piece of artwork, right? Because they're accepting artwork that's not just a framed photograph. It might be a painting on canvas. It could be a clay sculpture. It could be a computer that does a thing. I don't know, whatever. And so they want to know, how large is this thing? What is the space it's going to take up? I just left that part out. And I thought, well, this is a sure way for me to not get picked because I'm sending them the file. I'm not actually sending them the finished product, and I can't tell them how large it is. And so, you know, that might be a problem where they reject me. And maybe some of the applications I put in did reject me for that reason. But I've gotten into, 2 galleries now, just sending a JPEG of the file rather than any kind of actual artwork. Now I have the benefit, because I'm in these galleries, I have gotten work printed and photographed, and now I can submit that work and say, hey, it's exactly this size. But I didn't have that option in the initial times that I submitted artwork. So I think don't let yourself be held back from submitting to a gallery or to a local coffee shop or whatever it may be, just because you don't have the physical final product to show. If you've just got that JPEG file that you took, that's all that you really need. So if you're curious about doing a gallery, if you're curious about getting your artwork into a physical space in some form or another, I think the best thing you can do is just do it. Just start now. Don't wait until you've built out the whole series and everything's been done perfectly. Just start submitting to things now and get some experience in filling out those submission forms. Get some experience in going into that coffee shop and talking to the owner or whoever's available. And then that way you might get in and perfect, you did it. But if you don't, then you get some practice doing that. And once you have the larger body of work ready, then, you're ready to jump in and start submitting to stuff. So I think that's really cool. And I just wanted to say that those two things kind of go hand in hand between the photo book and the gallery showing. So, or gallery submissions, I should say. But yeah, we are live. So if you guys have questions, if you have thoughts, if you have photography topics that you want to talk about, drop them in the chat and let's get chatting about some of that photography stuff. There were a couple things I saw this last week or two that I thought were kind of cool. They're a little bit more gear related, but I thought they were interesting. One, which I saw in a rumor and I have not seen it since, is, and you guys let me know if you've heard any more about this than I have, but it's that Pentax is considering releasing a new camera, full frame. I believe they said 69 megapixels, or was it might have been it might have just been the 61 megapixel Sony sensor, but that the hitch here is that it would be a DSLR. So it would not be the classic, mirrorless change. And Pentax has talked about staying as a DSLR brand. And so the news or the rumor that I saw was brand new. What did they say it was? Was it the K1 Mark III or something was what it would be called? And it would have a 61 or more megapixel sensor. I think 61 is the one that Sony made. Supposedly it is a Sony sensor, but that it would remain a DSLR. And I feel like it's an interesting move. Like Pentax has said multiple times they're committed to staying with the DSLR. And I kind of am curious about that because at the time that I feel like they originally said that, everybody was like, why would you do that? Everyone was kind of like, this is stupid. Why would Pentax stay with the DSLR? And I feel like a lot of people also thought maybe Pentax just doesn't have the money, the staff, the resources to be able to do a mirrorless camera. Maybe they don't have the market share to be able to pull it off. Like I saw a lot of stuff like that. That people were saying, and I kind of agreed with some of it, at least at the time. Like they're going to be the only DSLR brand. But now that, I don't know, a year, 2 years has gone by since they made that sort of claim, I kind of feel like it makes some sense because now that I've shot on both a DSLR and a mirrorless camera, I feel like, I don't know, the hype of mirrorless is maybe not as pronounced as it seemed like it would be, if that makes sense. Like a lot of the times, it was like, oh, mirrorless cameras are going to be lighter and they're going to be smaller and more compact. Like Sony was so big on that. And now you look at mirrorless cameras and you're like, well, they're not really that much smaller than the DSLR counterparts. But then when you look at the lens, now I'm not going to speak on Canon because I haven't really compared Canon to old Canon. But if you look at just like Sony to old Sony, it's like, okay, the camera might be a little bit more narrow, but it's kind of about as tall and about as wide. And so, okay, we lose a little bit of narrowness where we lost the mirror, but now the lens all kind of seem to have an adapter built into them. So it's like now all of your lens are heavier than the older counterpart would have been. Like they're bigger and bulkier. So it's like if you're carrying around 2, 3, 4 lens in your kit, you're probably going to have a bag that weighs more than a DSLR bag because yes, the DSLR might be larger, but all of the lens would individually each be smaller. And so the total weight would be less. I don't know if that even makes sense. But that's one component. That's like one example of where like maybe mirrorless was kind of overhyped. Now I do think probably the biggest two issues with mirrorless that I hear people have are battery life and the resolution of the viewfinder. And both of those are kind of like, in the beginning, yes, battery life was terrible, but it does seem like battery life is getting better. I don't know if battery life would ever be as good as a DSLR counterpart, but it's at a point where I think it's good enough and you can get through a whole day of shooting. And so it's not really a concern anymore. And similarly, the optical viewfinder versus the electronic viewfinder, it's like the optical viewfinder has certainly some really great benefits, especially when there's plenty of light. But so too does the electric viewfinder, because with an electronic viewfinder, yeah, the resolution might not be as high as what your eye would see through an optical viewfinder, but you do have the ability to digitally zoom in and, to have some enhancements that you don't have with the optical viewfinder. And I will definitely say when you're manually focusing, sometimes it is a little easier to have that ability to kind of punch in a little closer and really see what is in focus and what is not in focus. Now that also relies heavily on the resolution of the electronic viewfinder. If it's not a good resolution and you punch in, you're just looking at a mess of pixels and it's not really helping you that much. Even if you have a good, sharp, high resolution electronic viewfinder, if it's too dark out, then, or if you're in an indoor setting and it's too dark, when you go to punch in, again, it can be very difficult to get a good enough resolution because now you have all this noise in the image. But I think as the camera technology is progressing and as that electronic viewfinder becomes higher and higher resolution, then you do start to have some potential benefits where it is still kind of mixed. You might have some situations where an electronic viewfinder would really excel over an optical viewfinder. And then you might have some situations where the optical viewfinder might excel over the electronic viewfinder. So I think it's still mixed, but it's interesting to see with Pentax sticking with the DSLR and how much maybe like love and hate they got for that decision. Now, with it being so many months later, so many years later, I kind of wonder, like, does that make sense for them now? More or less so than it did at the time, because a big selling point was people who own Pentax cameras will not have to buy a whole new system. They can continue to use their existing Pentax lens. And that's great. Everybody loves to save a little money and use the kit that they already have. But then is that kind of like kicking the can down the road where you might be shooting your foot, shooting yourself in the foot later on? Or is there a moment with people like myself who kind of go back to shooting some DSLRs, and maybe that's Pentax's long game is like people are going to get tired of the EV and they're going to go back to, I'm not sure. I'm very curious. And I am very curious with Pentax putting out a very high megapixel. I mean, 61 megapixels or more. I mean, you guys tell me if what the actual resolution of that rumor was, but it was over 60 for sure. I think it was like closer to 70. And it's in a DSLR format, which is fine. I mean, that doesn't, it's still the same resolution, but like, I guess I wonder what their primary selling market would be. And I wonder if it has the option of live view, would be another question I have. Roberto's in here. Starbursts are way easier with mirrorless. Okay, reading that, my first thought is you're talking about Starburst, the candy. But I think that's because I'm so focused on shooting candy these days that my brain just goes to that. But I kind of wonder Starbursts if you mean like astro photography, because that might make more sense for the general population that doesn't photograph candy. I don't know. WYSIWYG was a game changer for beginning photography. In what way? Tell me more about that. I'm curious about that statement. I'm curious about both of your statements. I'm also wondering if I'm just thinking of candy too much with that Starburst statement. But yeah, I do feel like, man, it's kind of tough to say. Like, Pentax putting out this camera is kind of cool that it's a DSLR, and that if you already have existing lens, assuming, we also have to put a caveat on that, do the existing lens that Pentax has for their DSLRs resolve a 60 plus megapixel sensor? Because it is very possible that there are some lenses in their arsenal that they're not optically sharp or high quality enough to be able to resolve a 61 megapixel plus sensor. So that would be a question. But assuming that they have those lenses available, and I would think it would be kind of weird for them to release a camera that there's no lens for, Canon. Then I'd be very curious, because usually a 61 megapixel, you're talking about 3 core things: landscape photography, product/commercial photography, or portraiture. Those are like the 3 bread and butter types of photography for using a really high megapixel sensor like that. So I wonder, is that then intended to target professionals? Are there still professionals using DSLRs, or have they kind of moved into using more mirrorless stuff? Yeah, I'm not sure. Starbursts when shooting sun between trees type effect. Ah, okay. Yeah. That makes a lot more sense than shooting starbursts. I mean, a mirrorless could be easier when shooting the candy starbursts also. It would kind of depend. I think in having shot, I mean, actually, when I think about it, most of the candy art series has been shot on DSLR cameras, because I used the Olympus E300 for the very first shot I ever did. And I quickly jumped over to the Olympus E500 because it was the same camera with just more options and more settings control. And then I probably did a couple shots on the Sony that I didn't love, so I didn't stick with it. And then at that point, it was the Pentax 645D. So I really haven't done much candy on a mirrorless camera outside of the Sony A7 Mark III, and I think maybe 1 or 2 on the A6400, which those are very similar cameras despite their format difference of full frame versus crop sensor. But Yeah, I don't know. I think manually focusing would be easier for sure. Um, and I will say when you're shooting candy, not just Starburst, but when you're shooting candy, um, depending on what camera you're using, sometimes the autofocus is not usable for candy art because it will, even though you would think the candy is so small that even if it were to focus on the backdrop, it would still get all of the candy in focus. That ends up not being the case. And a lot of that's because it's a macro situation. And so, yeah, you're shooting at f11, but you're also, centimeters away from your subject. So that depth of field still gets super, super narrow. Um, but yeah, I find especially on the Pentax 645D, because it's medium format and you're putting it really close, that focus is razor thin, even at f11, even at f16. And it's almost just worth only shooting manually. So I have like a little trick that I do where I figure out where in focus is, and then I push just a little bit past that, take the first shot, and then back it off like 2 or 3 shots. And then usually 2 of them are in focus, but guaranteed one of them will be perfectly in focus where you want it. So you can see the exposure with mirrorless, blown out highlights. DSLR, you rely more on histogram. Ergo, the WYSIWYG comment. Ah, I see. Yeah. Yeah, I think that with mirrorless, there is like one thought I remember having when I switched over and started shooting mirrorless for a while was that I wondered, could I still shoot a DSLR without needing to. Back in the day when I was doing the DSLR stuff, there was all this. I think it was kind of like a what do you call it? Like a fad or something, where it was considered bad to check your image to see if you got it, and they called it. I think they called it chimping or something. But it was like you take a photo and then you go back and look to see if you got the photo, because with a DSLR you don't have any idea until you take it. And so the idea was like you train yourself to just kind of anytime you walk into a place, you're thinking about shutter speed, aperture, ISO combination to get a good exposed shot. And so I did get to a point where I could shoot the DSLR and not really need to look at it and just know that I did dial in the right settings. So when I went to mirrorless and I could see the exposure before I took it, I started wondering like, oh, if I go back to a DSLR, have I lost a skill where now I don't need to think about the exposure as much? And so I would have a terrible hit rate if I didn't have the ability to see what I was shooting. And that's not how it works. I went and started shooting a DSLR again and basically remembered how to do all that. So you don't lose the skill. It's like riding a bike. You always have it. But with mirrorless, it is nice, some of the functionality of being able to see adjustments before you take them. I've always been a big fan of being able to digitally zoom in when you're doing any kind of focusing manually. That's always a pain on certain DSLR cameras. My Mamiya luckily has, I forget what you call it in this moment, but it's like some kind of prism, like a focusing prism in the actual viewfinder, and you can pull it out and put different types in there. But what it does is that as you're focusing, things that are out of focus will kind of look pixelated inside the prism, and as you focus on something, it will become sharp within the prism. I don't know what the technology is, super basic, but that can really make shooting manually on a DSLR fairly easy to do because you have that prism. For whatever reason, that's not just like a default tool that comes on all DSLR cameras. So like my Pentax 645D does not have that. You just have to fully zoomed out try to focus on stuff, which can be a little challenging. But with good light, it is definitely possible. That was an awesome series, the candy videos you did. Yeah, we're in here in October for Halloween, I'm going to put out a candy art video that's Halloween themed. So it'll all be classic Halloween candy. And I'm going to use a very Frankenstein camera that I'll reveal in that video to shoot it. So it'll be a Halloween themed candy episode, which I'm really looking forward to. I've spent a couple days working on it so far, and it'll be fun. True mirrorless made us lazy. Yeah, maybe it might have. I feel like it did also, though, open up technological opportunities for us that didn't exist in the past. I mean, even just the ability to adapt lens from different kinds of systems is really cool. Like, take a medium format lens and use it on a full frame camera is like, that's pretty neat. You could already kind of do that with a DSLR, I guess, but it's obviously much more possible with the current mirrorless stuff, which is, I think good. I mean, I've got nothing against mirrorless cameras. I don't think they're bad. I think they're just a tool. I mean, I've got one for all the video stuff. This Canon R7 is just right over here. And it takes some really nice photos. Actually, is probably, of all of the mirrorless cameras I've used, well, it's the second best mirrorless camera that I've ever used in terms of just image quality, color, clarity, all that good stuff. I think the best actually is the 50S from Fujifilm in terms of image quality, but that's actually more or less the same sensor. I think it's the exact same sensor in the Pentax 645Z. So you don't necessarily have to spend the GFX 50S money to get that image quality. You can get a DSLR that has the exact same sensor and much cheaper lens. I mean, gosh, I don't know how many times people tell me the GFX is a cheaper system than the Pentax. It's not true. There's no way you can do the math and it's true, because you can find a GFX 50S that probably rivals the price of certainly that rivals the price of a 645Z. For whatever reason, that Z is still like $2,000+, which is wild. But the 645D you can find for like $1,300-$1,400 without really even looking. And if you look really hard, you can get it for probably about $1,000. It might even start to go under $1,000. So that one is probably still cheaper than the GFX 50S. But I will admit the body of the 50S tends to be routinely cheaper than the body of the 645Z. But the thing is, you don't only do photography with just the body. You got to have a lens. And the GFX lens are crazy expensive. If you try to get them used, they're still like, gosh, probably 4+ times the cost of a Pentax 645 lens. And I'm talking about one with autofocus, like the FA series. You can find those for like $200-$300, maybe like a mint condition for $400. They're super easy to find on eBay. And again, you can get a good deal without even looking. So it's like, once you put the package together and you say, okay, I bought the camera, but I also bought the lens, then the Pentax, no way anyone says it's cheaper. Granted, the Fujifilm has the benefit of being able to also adapt other lens from other manufacturers. Unfortunately and crazily, you cannot adapt a Pentax 645 autofocus lens onto a Fujifilm GFX body and still have the electronics work. That seems wild to me. That seems like if you were buying a GFX camera, you would want to be able to potentially get a Pentax lens and have the electronics still work. Maybe they don't work as well, but I mean, the Pentax lens are sharp. Like the image quality is great. And so to be able to cheaply stick that on your GFX seems like a no-brainer. And the adapter would be cheap. I mean, the adapter plus a Pentax lens would still be cheaper than buying a used GFX camera, or GFX lens, I should say. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent there. I think I remember Peter McKinnon had a guy on his channel that printed huge prints of gummy bears and other things like that. Oh, that's sick. I got to check that out. I'm actually going to write that down real quick because I would love to see what other people do with the candy medium. I was in Target not long ago. I had just done a photo. Maybe I'll pull it up so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Any Target shoppers may have seen this at Target themselves. Let me see if I can pull it up. Not that this was at Target specifically, but okay, so here's the image. So I had just taken this image. No, this is the wrong image. They have the same background. Let's see, maybe we got it in here somewhere. Sometimes I got to remember also what camera I was using. There we go. Here's the image. Okay, so I had this image that I had just shot, and I went to Target, and I was walking. I forget what I was even buying, but I was trying to check the price in one of their price checking devices, and on the end cap there, they had some products or whatever, but they had along that narrow end cap I don't even remember what it was for. It was just like a picture that looked basically the same as this. Some different candy. It might have just been promoting candy that Target sells or something, but it was literally the same shot. It was like top down, a little bit of a shadow cast, and then it was a blue background with a bunch of colorful candy on it. I know some of them was like the sweet and sour, like colorful ribbons. There was a few of those, like with the sugar encrusted top. But I'm over there checking my price machine to see what price this thing is that I'm buying, and I'm like, I just took this photo. Somebody already beat me to it, and theirs has already been, purchased, printed, and hung up in the Target. So they kind of got claimed to being the first one to do it. So, yeah, I remember that happening to me, but yeah, I love to see what other people do, with candy art. I have some ideas going into 2025 to kind of change up the way that the candy art series looks so that it goes from just being like top down or side angle of candy just laying on a backdrop, and it kind of turns into more of a still life. And so maybe there's an element of like using candy to construct something that then can take this to a different level and even maybe go in a very different direction. But yeah, I'll have to see what person it was and what kind of candy that they were photographing and how they went about it. That'll be really fun. Let's see. I'm gonna take a sip here. As you can tell, love having good colorful stuff. At some point in 2022, color in photography became my sole focus, it feels like. I actually had somebody ask me about black and white on the Olympus E500, I think it was. They were watching one of the videos I had put out about that camera, and they asked, how do the black and white files look? And I was like, I didn't even know this thing could shoot in black and white. I mean, I knew that because every camera can basically go into monochrome mode, but I stopped. I was like, wow, I never even thought about the fact that this camera probably has a black and white mode. So I'm going to change it up probably for November and maybe do a video where I'll take that camera out for a week or a couple weeks and just shoot a bunch of stuff and only do it in black and white and see what my experience is. I hate to say it though, because this is a little bit controversial. I feel like I hate black and white. Now I want to preface that by saying when I see other people's work in black and white, a lot of times I'm like, dang, that looks classy. Like, especially a portrait done in black and white, either a portrait or a candid of someone who's at a party or at an event, but it's shot in black and white, I think is very classy looking. But when I think about me shooting black and white, I just feel like in my mind, I think, what a waste. Whatever photographs I get, what a waste. I'm so used to shooting in color, and like I really prioritize shooting in color. Like I that's part of the voice that I've built for photography. So much so that even just thinking about not shooting in color makes me think like what a waste that is. I saw someone, this like a common thing people do on YouTube, where they'll be like, oh, I'm going to shoot black and white for a month or something. And there was a creator who was going to do black and white for a year straight. And I just remembered thinking like, oh man, I'm going to be so bored with this channel for the next year because I just don't care about black and white that much, which is bad. I mean, they took a bunch, I still watched, and they took a lot of great photos, but I do remember thinking, because, you know, they would also post the video, right? They do B-roll of them going out and shooting, and you see the subject that you're shooting and you're like, man, that would look sick in color, but they're going to force themselves to shoot it in black and white. So I don't know. I feel like that could be an opinion that people disagree with. But again, I do like photos that are in black and white, especially a classy portrait or a nice candid shot of people at an event or a party. Like that does look really cool. But for me, I think it's just part of my element to shoot in color. And I would almost prefer to shoot something in color and then convert it to black and white after the fact, so that I still have the original color file if I ever wanted it. But, you know, I say that, and I had a thought the other night when I was sleeping. I guess not when I was sleeping. When I was going to try to fall asleep, I had a thought, because otherwise it would have been a dream. But I had a thought about doing a series of something that I would normally shoot in color, purposely shooting it in black and white, but then attempting to colorize it after the fact. And would that be something that would be fun to do, entertaining? You know, would it elicit joy from me, from this noggin up here? Because I think that would be kind of cool. I do enjoy looking at colorized photos that were originally shot in black and white. So to, you know, that's something that's normally done only to archived footage. But what about a concept where you go in and you do that today in 2024 with the full ability to shoot in color, but you choose to shoot it in black and white and then colorize it? It seems like an interesting concept. Maybe there's more idea that needs to be filled out there for it to be like truly a good idea. But I don't know. I keep thinking back on that. Like, would that be cool to shoot the candy art series in black and white and then colorize the candy after the fact? It would at least be interesting. I know nothing about that technique, and that's part of the allure of it, is the ability to potentially learn something new. Like, if you asked me now, how do they colorize black and white images, I'd be like, I have no idea. They just guess what the colors were, which I'm pretty sure, honestly, it could be that simple, but I'm pretty sure it's not. I'm pretty sure there's a lot more skill that goes into it than just they guess. I will say maybe it could be something like Let me know in the chat if you know how this works, or if you're Wikipedia searching it. But it could be like The Wizard of Oz, where that movie was not shot in color, and people will be like, what? No, of course it's shot in color. It's so colorful. And you're like, no, it was shot in Technicolor, which is actually just black and white that then has, what is it, red, blue, and green filters put over it to create the illusion of color. And when I learned that, that was kind of mind-blowing, because The Wizard of Oz is a very saturated and colorful movie, and to learn that it wasn't shot in color, it was shot in black and white with some filters, is like, wow, but how does it look so convincing? Now, I don't know. There could also be an element of like, at one point it looked less convincing, and in the 90s or something they went back and they colorized it with more technology. That's certainly possible. But yeah, ultimately, no matter what version of The Wizard of Oz that you watch, whether they've messed with it since then or not, it was shot in black and white. You can't undo that. So any version you've ever seen is a black and white film with filters to make it look like it was shot in color, but it's just the illusion of color, which is crazy. On my Vegas Pro video editor, the AI color has that RGB thing going on it. It's crap, but something like that. Yeah, that would be interesting. I would definitely imagine AI would have the capability to be able to colorize stuff. I think for me, I don't know. I've got a bad taste in my mouth on AI. I initially was really excited about AI, specifically a tool that in Lightroom can help more easily remove like dust and stuff from your image. That was really appealing to me, because a lot of times when you're shooting the macro stuff, no matter how much you clean that backdrop, some dust gets on it, some little pieces of sugar fall off the candy and get onto the paper, a hair follicle, and it's so annoying to have this beautiful shot and then to have, you know, dust on it or hair on it that is visually seeable by a person looking at an 8x10 or an 11x14. They can see it, and that would drive me crazy. And so I would have to go in and manually remove all that. But then Adobe had an AI tool that made it a lot easier. So I was like, ooh, AI is kind of cool. And then similarly, Adobe had a tool that could increase the size. What was it? It was either it can double the size of your image or it can double the pixels of your image. But essentially what happens is it takes your image and it upscales it with AI to a point where only 1/4 of the pixels in the image are original pixels. 3/4 of the pixels of the image are completely made up by AI. And yet when you look at it, it looks incredibly convincing. It looks like you shot it in a higher resolution. So if you shot it on an 8 megapixel camera, well, now that's a 32 megapixel photo. And so that was a really cool feature. And there was a podcasting tool where you upload your file and AI will remove all the background noise and will make some enhancements that are like pretty typical enhancements to like increase the volume and give it a little bit more bass boost, or, you know, whatever it was. And it was like, ooh, this is a really cool feature too. But I don't know, since then, a lot of the stuff that's come out with AI, it's like, I could do without this. I think, and I have a personal opinion, I feel like AI should be kept out of art, and art should be made by humans. And I think if someone makes something with AI, they should include almost like a nutritional facts. What percent of this was made by AI? You know, if you just did a little touch up to remove some dust, okay, maybe this is like 1% or 5% influenced by AI. And so it's virtually a human creation. AI just helped make the job easier. But if it's like people going into the Chat GPT or I don't think Chat GPT really does photos and video. I could be wrong about that. But some of these other AI tools, and not just increasing the resolution or trying to increase sharpness, but like actually just prompting like create this image, and then the AI just does it for them. I don't know. To me, it feels like cheating a little bit. Now, maybe a painter might say that taking a photograph is cheating. Yeah, maybe that kind of makes sense, but there's still so much skill that goes into a photograph. The most you could say skill-wise in using an AI is just being good at typing out prompts. And I think that's just too simple of a thing, and too easy to just go to a list of prompts and pick them out. So I don't know. I notice, and yeah, you make a really good point. The amount of fake photos on Facebook getting thousands of likes makes me sad. Instagram's gotten this way too, but I noticed on Facebook also, I rarely go on Facebook. Primarily, I go on Facebook these days to sell stuff that I don't want anymore on Facebook Marketplace. But to get to Facebook Marketplace, you got to pass through regular Facebook, and occasionally they suck me in because that's what these platforms are intended to do. And I'll notice I'll scroll just a little bit, and I see a lot of these AI. They're not, I mean, sometimes they're photographs, but a lot of times they're like little video clips, and it's like, what's a good example? RoboCop, if it was shot in the 1950s on Panavision, or whatever. And so it's like an AI taking the elements of RoboCop, but doing them in a classic like 1950s, sci-fi style. And it's like the concept is cool. The concept of like, what would RoboCop look like if they had made it in the 1950s and made everything look like 1950s sci-fi. Yeah, that's an interesting concept, but the fact that AI did it and it took 10 seconds for you to prompt it and get the images and you're done is like, I don't know, man, that seems like garbage in a way, which is a bummer. But how far out are we from them saying, okay, here's the first ever AI movie, or hey guys, we're coming out with a brand new Stanley Kubrick movie. And we're all like, what? He's dead. And it's like, no. We took every single movie Stanley Kubrick ever made, and we took every single thing that he wrote, all the letters he wrote to people, all the scripts he wrote, journal entries. We took every interview that he did, every piece of content, both published and unpublished, all this stuff that the world never even knew about. And we took all that material, we fed it into an AI, and we made that AI Stanley Kubrick. We gave that AI Stanley Kubrick's identity, and we gave him, the AI, every piece of content he ever made or thought or wrote down. And so this AI then went and created a movie, directed a movie, as Stanley Kubrick would have done it. Folks, this is not an AI movie of Stanley Kubrick. This is Stanley Kubrick. Get your tickets now, click the link, buy the, you know what I mean? Like, how far are we from that? Where they're going to start saying, this is as good as John Carpenter making a new horror film, because we fed this AI everything about John Carpenter. So effectively, this AI is John Carpenter, and this movie is exactly the movie he would have made if he were still alive. And it's like, no, that's not how any of this works, But I feel like that's going to happen. I guarantee you that's going to happen. I mean, it already does. That's the thing. I went and saw Alien Romulus And um, Alien Romulus is honestly a really great film. I thought I enjoyed the heck out of it. Other than the final like boss battle, if you will, I wasn't a big fan of that because it seemed like just a rehash of something that they'd already done in a different movie. But other than that, it was a great movie. The one part that was really annoying was when they bring back Bishop with a different name. They call him Rook, but obviously a nod chess piece, Bishop chess piece. And it's a deep fake, and it was a bad deep fake. If it had been a really convincing deep fake, then I think there would have been less people annoyed with it. But because the deep fake was not even good, then it's like, this actor died years ago, and you've brought him back to be in this movie. And on the legal side of things, you got his widow or someone in his estate to sign off and give you the thumbs up, but he's not here to play this character. That seems wrong to me. Like, once someone dies, they should be dead, you know? Dying sucks enough. To know that you sort of go on as an AI or a deep fake and people can control what you do. He has no influence over how the acting was done. He might view that and say, wow, this person did such a bad job acting that it makes me look terrible, you know, but I'm dead. So it's not something I can even combat, you know? I don't know, man. I mean, I feel like they already do it. We're not that far off from just fully AI generated movies. And you know, Hollywood's at least going to try to do it. Probably they'll start off with a animated film because that's easier to do AI with because already it's not real. So we're less worried about like, do people's fingers look right? It wouldn't matter because it'd be an AI film, right? But I guarantee you, Hollywood will at least try to do fully AI created movies, and they will only not do it if people really hate that. But even then, they'll still do it. They'll just do it in a more hidden way. It's like CGI. Everybody claims to hate CGI, and I think most people genuinely do. But, you know, you get all these movies where they're like, oh, we made this movie with zero CGI. And then it's just a blatant lie. Because then you have all these other YouTube channels where they'll go in and say, this movie claims they made the movie without CGI. And let me go in and show you all the evidence that shows that they absolutely used CGI in this movie. So it'll be the same thing. Like AI is the new CGI. Everyone hates CGI. Everyone's going to hate AI, but they're still going to use AI because it's so much cheaper, just like CGI. CGI was so much cheaper, and it allowed you to do potentially more than you could do physically at a much faster pace than you could do physically. You know, so it's like, if we can dream big, we're not limited by our budget. We're not limited by physics. Like, we can use CGI to do things that are physically impossible, but we can just make them happen because we're using a computer. And the same is the case with AI. It makes things a lot cheaper to just have AI spin up whatever you need, and, you know, potentially allows you to do even more because now you can have actors who don't say no because they're not real. They're not real people, or they are dead people that you've brought back. We're so far off of photography with that little rant of mine. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't think AI is necessarily the worst, but I do think humans should make art, not computers. And if computers are involved in making art, there should be a recognition of, you know, what % of your artwork was made by something other than you, you know. I think if you're using a computer to edit a photo, you're still fully in control of that process. But if you're having an AI go in and make the edits for you, now you're really just a passenger. And so you need you need a disclaimer. You need a nutritional facts on your photograph. Uh, some people may disagree with that though, and I think they would be it would be reasonable for them to. Let's see. So it's Halloween coming up. I do not have a costume, and I need to think of one. But I've waited a bit too long to really get into building my own costume. But speaking of photos, I love to get photos of a costume. You know, when I've got a really good one, I've custom made some costumes in the past from scratch. I've been very proud of, and I guess this year's just not one of those years for me. I'll probably still make a costume, but it's probably not going to be the most well thought out, I guess. Very interesting topic. It's going to be a big thing, so good to talk about it. Yeah, I mean, it is definitely good to talk about AI in terms of art, because it feels like AI's taken the biggest chunk out of art so far. Like, it's replacing other kinds of jobs too, but for whatever reason, it feels at least like people are utilizing AI to make movies, photos, music, and so often this AI is literally just ripping off existing artists. Like, I saw an AI that ripped off the Beatles, and it was just like literally a carbon copy of a Beatles song. And it's like, okay, it can only do that if you've plugged in Beatles music into this software. It's familiar, but what is that movie on the TV playing? Oh, that is The Wraith, 1980s movie. It has, it's got a couple famous people in it. Charlie, why can I not think of his name? It's the guy that plays the Wraith. He was the guy from 2.5 Men. I think he may have fallen off a bit in life. But yeah, it's The Wraith. Really, really great movie. Charlie Sheen. There you go. Charlie Sheen. Yes. Yeah, it's got Charlie Sheen in it, and it has, who is his love interest? She's in a couple other movies. Oh man, I cannot think of her name either. But then it also has another famous dude who I also can't think of his name. I can't think of anybody's name, but yeah, really good movie. I feel like next to nobody has seen it. Not quite a Halloween movie, but it does have a lot of death in it, and it has some supernatural elements to it. So I feel like it could kind of fit in as a Halloween movie. So there you go. I did also want to talk about, speaking about, this Pentax camera that just came out. There was also a DIY E-mount camera that was just on, I want to say it was on like Petapixel or something like that. And I was trying to look it up. I forget what it was called. Let me go to Petapixel's website. But it's a guy who basically built his own camera, and it works with the E-mount system. And here we go. Yeah, it's actually the first one on Petapixel's website. So yeah, photographer builds stylish open source full frame DIY camera. It's called the Cetina S1. This thing looks honestly pretty sick. The fact that it's even evolved to this level at all is really cool. I'm hoping, I mean, because here's the thing is, like, it does still need some work, mainly software side, to get things to run a bit more smoothly, like the what do you call it, the live view, so that you can see what's happening is a bit glitchy and jittery and whatnot. And so there's some things he needs to do in there to like really get the software side and the processing side well written in terms of code. But that being said, it does take photos, and he showed some examples. Is like, that's honestly some pretty good looking photos. But this, the fact that it is not just a, rigged up piece of garbage looking camera, like this actually looks like it could be a real camera, right? It's got a grip, it's got a body, it has, a unified sort of like design logic to it. This looks more or less like a finished product. Like if you showed this to me and said, hey, this is the new Satina S1 that just came out, I'd be like, oh, sick, that's cool. Like it looks done, more or less. It certainly has kind of a clunky, minimalist sort of design, but I would just read that as like, oh, that's just the design logic that they used to make this camera. This is at a point where I would say, like, I would not be surprised to see Sony get involved and try to shut him down and say, potentially this could steal business from us, because in a way it'd be interesting if this is an E-mount compatible camera, then you could buy cheap E-mount third-party lens and literally have a completely third-party E-mount system that has nothing to do with Sony. It's like it's a full camera, and then you can go buy lens from Viltriox or TT Artisans or whoever, and literally be using an E-mount camera that is not in any capacity made by Sony. So I could see them kind of clapping this guy a bit. I mean, it obviously he's not selling this, and it's not even really done. It still has a long way to go. But why would they wait for him to be done? Why not just shut him down now? But if you haven't seen this, it is worth a watch. It's very interesting, and they go into some pretty good details about how he went through the process to build this out. And it's a step above like the Raspberry Pi, setups that people have done, or when people will like take a printer. I've seen so many people where they take like the printer scanner and they turn that into a camera, and it looks absolutely ridiculous and it works terribly. But this actually already can produce a pretty solid image. So with some fine tuning on the software side, like that actually could be, a pretty good camera. So I guess these are some of the images, some of the sample images. So obviously this has a bunch of something. I'm not sure what would cause that, unless he just has a ton of crap on the lens or the sensor. But if you look at just the resolution, like if you ignore these weird things, these weird spots on this is pretty detailed. It kind of looks a little bit like film in a way, like a little bit lower resolution. But I mean, you're getting all the cables, you're getting the colors, you're getting the sky. It's not too overly blown out or too dark in the shadow. So it clearly has some dynamic range capabilities. Same with this shot. I guess we have a lot less of those weird marks on this. But I mean, the resolution here looks sharp. And this is coming out of a literally hand-built camera. Same with this. I think there's some, and we also don't know what lens he was using. So if he was using like a vintage lens on the camera or something like that, then, definitely it's going to have a more vintage look to it. But if he were to use a more modern lens, I bet this would be even sharper. I wonder how it would do with autofocus. I wonder if I don't remember from the video if it actually has autofocus or not. And I would be very interested to know if currently or when he's done, will he release this? He's saying this is open source, and this is a full frame camera too, so that's worth calling out. But will he release this to, you know, regular people, or is this going to be something where he's going to try to sell it and people can buy the camera, or is he just going to put, here's the info about how to make the camera. If you've got a 3D printer and you want access to the parts, here's the parts I used, and here's the way to build the camera, and then he just gives it away. So it does look like, okay, actually, if we look at this, he's using a vintage lens, and there does look like there's dirt and stuff on the lens. So I think when we look at this photo, and I'm like, what the heck is all this stuff? It's literally just stuff on this vintage lens. He just needs to pick up a better lens or just clean it. It's as simple as just cleaning it, really. I built one with a Raspberry Pi and an old Polaroid body, and ended up more of a comedy, but it did kind of work. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious about the ability to go in and you know, do a Raspberry Pi setup, or even do some of these other setups with like a scanner that you convert into a printer or into a camera, whatever it may be. Like it's cool to mess around with that stuff because you learn about photography, but certainly this guy's on another level with how much effort he's put into that camera. I mean, it's getting to a point where he's going to have more or less a finished product, which is pretty cool. He's a smart dude. But it'll be interesting to see if he's allowed to finish this project, and if he does, what does he do with it? Well, shoot. Let's see, what time is it? What questions do you guys have? What do y'all want to talk about? Photography-wise. Let's see, for me, it is 7:57, so it's almost 8 o'clock. And I will also say, too, for anyone who has watched this and it's not live and you're watching it after the fact, you know, definitely feel free to throw out questions or comment on things in the comment section afterwards, because I'm going back and still reading those and answering people if they ask questions. So just because it isn't live doesn't mean you can't participate, which is cool. But yeah, I'm planning on doing these. Probably will try to do one every week here in October. So I'll probably do one, I don't know, I'm thinking maybe like next Thursday I'll do another one also. And kind of the same thing, like we'll just talk about photography, or even, I mean, shoot, things that are outside of photography are game as well. I mean, I've gone on a few unrelated rants tonight, so that all counts. It all works. And we'll have movies on in the background. Looks like this one's over. I have another one queued up here, though. This song, I know you guys can't hear it, but this song is actually kind of a good song. I've never heard it. It's just like the soundtrack for this movie, which, if you thought the movie was cool, and it is, the cars, like if you're into cars at all, this movie has some really cool cars in it, and a custom car that they made for the movie. But it's called the Wraith from 1986, I want to say. I could be totally wrong about that. I kind of just threw a number out. Let's see. This remote does not work right now. There we go. We just gotta lean all the way out. Okay, we got Cyborgs. Not a good movie. but a funny one to watch. And then I think they also did Cyborgs 2, but this has Jean-Claude Van Damme, I think, is in this, which there's a really good channel. If you like Jean-Claude Van Damme, who doesn't? But if you also love to make fun of Steven Seagal, there's a channel called Space Ice, I think, where it's mainly just poking fun at Steven Seagal the whole time. Pretty funny channel on YouTube. I would highly recommend it. He just basically does a Hollywood-style voiceover for essentially talking about the plot of Steven Seagal movies as if it's sort of an extended, like one part it's an extended trailer for the movie and one part it's a dissection of the movie. But very funny. So can't recommend it enough. It's called Space Ice. I want to say is the name of the channel. But if you type in Steven Seagal movie or something, I'm sure his will be one of the potential options that pop up in the search. I had another topic I wanted to talk about tonight, which I'm curious about people's opinions on. And it's kind of around in the photography world. And I think this might be a little bit less the case these days, but I don't know. You guys tell me. But kind of like secrecy and gatekeeping surrounding photography, and primarily within like, your settings in your camera, or the lens you're using. Like, I remember when I got started in photography, there was kind of this culture about other photographers that it's rude. Like, you shouldn't ask another photographer what settings they use to achieve something. You shouldn't ask them like what lens they're using or what aperture they're shooting at. And if you are a photographer, like, you don't tell people what your settings are and what your, how you're shooting, like what your techniques are. And I guess that was probably just born out of, people don't want their sort of style to be stolen. But it's like, I don't know, it seems like a kind of a dumb reason. And I can't tell. I don't hang out with photographers as much as I did when I first got into photography, because I was just so hungry to do as much photography as possible. And I knew at that stage, at least, I would do more photography if I hung out with other photographers, and then I would have people to shoot with. And so that would get me to shoot even more. And, I got into photography in college, but I never took a class. Instead, I went to YouTube University, which in today's world is kind of a derogatory thing, I think, to say. It's usually like someone who's telling you about research that they did on their own, and it's usually just like conspiracy theory stuff. And then I think the joke is like, this person knows more than like a college professor, but they went to YouTube University, something like that. But I used to say that, like, I learned photography from watching creators on YouTube talk about what is ISO, what is aperture, what happens if you use a higher aperture, what happens if you use a lower aperture, what about shutter speed, white balance, autofocus, depth of field, focal, points, or focal perspective. And that's really how I learned about photography, but it was not made easier by the people that I hung out with and did photography with, because it was very frowned upon to be like, oh, that's a really cool shot. Like, how did you shoot that? What settings did you use? Or frowned upon to be like, oh, what lens do you have there? And people would be like, oh, it's almost like this is their secret recipe the combination of the camera, the lens, and all their settings, that's their secret recipe. Same with, oh, how did you edit that? Like, what do you do when you go in and edit stuff? And people would be like, oh no, like you're going to steal my style. And to an extent, in a way, like it can kind of be true. I've definitely been on a photo walk before where like people leave with all the same photos. And sometimes it's like, oh, how did you shoot that? And you tell them, and then they're shooting it, and they're like, yeah, it works. And it's like, okay, well, that's my photo, so don't take that. So I get it, but it just seemed so over the top. It's like everybody's hiding everything, and it's like, dude, just tell me what shutter speed you used on that. Like, I'm learning, man. I'm trying to soak up knowledge. At that time, I'll never forget, ISO 100 was king. If you shot anything above ISO 100, you were a loser who sucks at photography. And because that was such a narrative, I legit thought like, oh, you got to shoot everything at the lowest possible ISO all the time. And you ideally should be good enough at photography that you only ever use ISO 100. And that's stupid. You know, like ISO 100 doesn't even offer you the most dynamic range. Like usually ISO like 800 is the maximum amount of dynamic range that your camera will produce. And it was like such a mind-blowing moment for me when I learned that different ISOs can produce different levels of dynamic range, and that some ISOs have a more narrow dynamic range than others. Like that blew my mind. I was like, what? ISO 800 produces more dynamic range than ISO 100? What? And it's like, it makes sense. But when you're in a culture where everyone's like, oh, you got to shoot everything at ISO 200 or 100, you're not even thinking about, like, the idea of shooting at ISO 800 is a sin. And it's like, if someone would just tell you their settings, you'd say, oh, you're shooting at a higher ISO. Why? Well, because that's what this shot needs, you know? And then you kind of learn that shooting above ISO 100 isn't so bad. And most cameras, especially modern day cameras, it's totally fine. You don't even notice the difference. So I always was so annoyed by photographers' unwillingness to share what settings they were using or how they achieved certain shots. It's like, if your work is that good where people are stealing it, like, you're going to be fine. You know, ultimately, if they steal your work, it's not their work. They can't evolve with that work because they didn't do the hard work to come up with it. They just stole it from you. So they'll never evolve, and they'll just sort of fall flat. Meanwhile, you'll continue to evolve and, you know, kind of case closed. It's not going to work out for the people that are just cheating you. And I think that might be less the culture today. I don't hear people talk about ISO 100 as being the only ISO you should ever consider shooting at anymore. I don't hear people as much be annoyed when you ask them about their settings, but that might also just be that I'm not really asking people about their settings anymore because I don't need to learn as much. I mean, I still need to learn plenty, but basic settings like ISO and aperture, probably less so. Maybe more complex ideas at this point. I will say, I can think of one situation where gatekeeping was beneficial. When I first got started in photography, I did a lot of abandoned photography because it was accessible. It was also fun, you know, to try to find places that were abandoned. And so the thing with abandoned photography, though, was that it was very difficult to find places, and finding stuff on the internet wasn't always a sure thing because you might drive out to this place and it's not there anymore. It got bulldozed or it got boarded up and you can't get in. And so, you know, you use the internet as sort of like a starting point, leads. The internet might be your leads that, hey, there might be something good at a certain place. But then you had to do a little bit more research, and ultimately you just had to bite the bullet and go there and hope that it's still there and you can still get in. But because it took so much effort to find places, coupled with the fact that a lot of times when people find out about an abandoned place, too many people learn about it. And then you get people go out there and do a bunch of graffiti and spray paint stuff all over the place and start smashing out all the windows and breaking stuff and maybe drinking and doing, shit in the building. And what happens is, A, the beautiful nature of this abandoned, untouched place is kind of ruined. But B, a lot of times the landlord notices people are coming and going, and so then they take steps to really secure the place and get it boarded up where no one can get in, or they alert the police and the police start to include that as part of their patrol. And so a lot of people learning about an abandoned place is typically not good. And at that point, it's just a matter of time before the spot is ruined. And so for that reason, there was definitely a lot of gatekeeping in the abandoned photography community where people would outright refuse to tell you where this spot was that they had just photographed, or they would purposely conceal where they were at and not tell anyone the location. And if you asked, it was like, oh, that's bad. I'm not going to tell you where this spot was, whatever it may be. But it was for a good reason. It was like the idea that you might be respectful, but if I tell you, you will probably tell someone else who will tell someone else, and word gets out. And then now this spot gets ruined. Next time I go there, there's graffiti, there's smashed out windows. And it's like, ugh. And for me, the abandoned places that I thought were the coolest to photograph were the ones that had no graffiti, that the only damage to the place was whatever naturally had occurred through age and through just being neglected. But, having people go in and draw not safe for work things on the wall and stuff, it's like, well, this was a really cool shot and now it's kind of ruined. So to me, in that sense, it was like, yeah, I mean, it's gatekeeping out of necessity of sort of protecting some of these places and being respectful of them. But I think in terms of like general photography, people should be more open. I mean, here on YouTube, people are pretty open. Like they'll teach you a lot about how to shoot, which is great for photography. And even though I have not, really gone out and made like a video about ISO or shutter speed or things like that, like I'm very open about how I shoot candy artwork and like the things that I try to prioritize and, how I position the flash, what kind of gear that I use. Because for me at least, I'm not worried about other people making candy photography. Like, I think that's great. And I do see candy photography here in Austin even by other artists. And it's always so exciting to see because it's like we're working with the same medium, more or less. What did they do with it? How did they approach the subject matter that was similar or different from my approach? And I've seen people who have kind of taken the same thing. It's like, here's a colorful backdrop. I'm going to lay some candy on it. But it's a painter. And so they've painted that candy rather than photographed it. It's essentially the exact same shot as what I would do, but in a different format. Or it's someone who has done it in the photography format, but then they've, edited it a little differently than I did, or they've positioned the candy a little different. So I feel like it almost becomes like a genre where there's other types of um, photography or other types of styles that you can apply to the candy artwork. So even though you're still shooting candy, it's your own. It's your own unique voice. So, and honestly, if candy artwork blew up and everyone and their mother started making candy artwork, then, you know, that's fine. That's not the only thing in the world to photograph. So, oh boy. Let's see, where are we at now? 8:14. YouTube is great for photography learning. I think I already read that, but I agree. I wonder, I haven't looked at YouTube lately in terms of the learning component. When I was learning, some of the big channels for me back in the day, I remember there was a creator called, or his name was Griffin Hammond. And he actually, I was first introduced to him through a channel called Indie Mogul, I think is what it was called. Indie Mogul, maybe. And he was taking over as host of Indie Mogul. And it was primarily a filmmaking channel, but they did talk about a lot of similar elements that apply to photography, you know, exposure, composure, settings, you know, camera techniques, perspectives when using one lens over another, things like that. And so I learned a lot. And I felt that Griffin had a really good talent in how he explained things and how he communicated. Really felt like it resonated with me more so even than other creators who are explaining the various or the very same thing. But Griffin Hammond, he just had like a perfect presenter voice. And I know at some point, I think Indie Mogul stopped being a channel or something, and he started his own channel just called Griffin Hammond. And it was basically just the same, you know, kind of content. And I don't think he really makes content anymore. Every once in a while he posts like a random video, but it seems to be less and less about photography and video work and more just about like random stuff. Like he posted a video about trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon. And it was like, well, this isn't really a photography based thing, but he did like a sriracha documentary. So he did, you know, content about how did he film his documentary and how did he prioritize certain shots and things like that. And so it was a really great channel. It's a bummer that he doesn't still produce content on YouTube because he's just such a great, it's so easy to listen to him and hear everything he's saying and not have it just kind of go in one ear out the other. But this was also back in the day, I feel like before heavy sponsorships were a thing. Like you did have ads on YouTube, but they weren't nearly as intrusive as they are today. They were far, you know, like YouTube kind of ramped up the ad amount over time. So there was still less ads on YouTube at that stage, but also there weren't really a ton of in-video sponsorships. Like Squarespace wasn't sponsoring every other video that was out there. And, you know, you didn't have NordVPN and stuff like that. So a lot of the content creators literally just straight up made content. And I guess they made money off of just the ad revenue alone, but you didn't have to sit through in-video sponsorship stuff, which can really suck, honestly. I know this is a little tangent, but it can suck because at least when you're watching a YouTube video, number one, you have the option to buy YouTube Premium. Scam or not, like it exists as an option available to not see ads. But also like the YouTube ads more or less like have a specific amount of time that you're going to have to sit through it. It's like, okay, maybe I have to sit through 30 seconds. I can skip it within 10 seconds. But when the content creator themselves do a sponsorship ad inside of the video, that sucker could be 5 minutes long. And it is skippable, but it's like, it's only skippable if you go in and you move the progress bar up, and you don't know how far up to move it. But it's like, I'll see content creators doing like 5-minute ads inside of their video. And it's like, dude, that is too long, man. 30 seconds or a minute. But 5 minutes talking about Squarespace and building out your website is like, God dang, dude. I hope they're paying you a lot for that. I hope they're paying you a lot for 5 minutes of your time. This 25-minute video is actually just a 20-minute video, which it's actually just a 15-minute video because you have probably 5 minutes of intro and 5 minutes of exit. Oh, we're going on a tangent. Tangent train coming through. But yeah, I think learning on YouTube was a little easier back then, just because you didn't have as much ad, and you didn't have ads inside of videos nearly as much. And so when you got to the content, you were just in the content. And these days it seems like it's a bit more difficult because everything's sponsored. And then a lot of times the gear or the equipment being used in the video might be there because a sponsor or an advertiser sent that to them to use. And again, still happened back in the day, but at a less widespread sort of capacity. So it just seems like, yeah, it could be a little rough these days if you're not ad focused. But yeah, let's see what else we got. 8:21. We're hanging out. We're getting close to the 2-hour mark. I might call it around the 2-hour mark. Because I've never been one for really, really long streams. I don't have the ability to sit that long. But if this becomes a more common thing on the channel where we're doing more live streams, I'm going to try to do one a week this month and see what the reception is. But yeah, like if that's something that we're doing often, then I'll put a little bit more time into prepping materials for the live stream in terms of like, maybe having some graphics or some transitions, or things like that, to where it's a little nicer than just a screen of my beautiful face. So we might do a little bit more, but we'll just see what you guys think. I know the last stream we did, we had a bunch of people in, and that was pretty fun, talking about photography stuff, especially bouncing stuff off of other folks. Actually, speaking of ads, I'll throw out a free sponsorship for We Love Video. And I'll only do that because We Love Video is a nonprofit, and they are a video rental nonprofit here in Austin. So if you're in the Austin area, or if you're one of the viewers who lives in Texas and you sometimes come to Austin, worth checking out. It's like a kind of like a mom and pop video rental spot, and they have VHS that you can rent, DVD, Blu-ray, which is really cool. And then in the back, they have a small community theater, and they'll do screenings of movies and stuff in the back area, which the entire wall of the back area, you've got one part of it that's a giant screen, and then you have really nice theater seats. Like, honestly, these seats, they're not recliners, but they're better than like most non-recliner movie theaters that have just like the stinky, cheap fabric. Like, these are leather and they're really comfortable. So they definitely went all out on the seats. But yeah, you've got like a projector, and then it goes onto a screen, but then the entire other 3 walls are all VHS tapes, and you can actually pull them off of the wall and rent them, which is really cool. But then the main part of the video rental is mostly DVD and Blu-ray, but there are also some VHS that are out there that can be rented as well. And they've got TVs playing movies. It's like the classic vibe, you know, when you would go to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video, or maybe if you had a mom and pop video rental place, and they would have the movies playing while you're looking for what movie you want to rent. Like, same kind of vibes. A lot of collector's items up on the walls and up on the tops of all the shelves that are really cool. So it's just a good spot. It's called We Love Video in Austin, Texas, and it's a nonprofit video rental. And they also do a lot of community events. Like, they'll do VHS swaps, they'll do craft fairs. One time they were doing like a Back to the Future weekend. So they were playing Back to the Future in the theater, and they actually had a DeLorean like in pristine condition that was out in front of the shop. And they had a guy dressed up as Marty McFly, and they were doing photos and stuff. It was really, really cool. So they do all kinds of really neat stuff like that. But I mention them just because they're a nonprofit, and it's always good to support all kinds of nonprofits if they're good, I guess. But this is one that's good because it's providing a community service, and it saved a collection of movies. There was a place called I Love Video, which is why this is called We Love Video. But there was a commercial place called I Love Video, and it was a movie rental shop that had tens of thousands of movies. I mean, you could go in there and basically any movie you could think of, they had it. They had foreign films. I mean, foreign films from every country in the world. It was wild. But they eventually went out of business, and the community in Austin raised a ton of money through a Kickstarter to buy the collection from the owner and open up a nonprofit called We Love Video, where that collection could live on. And since then, the collection's actually grown a lot, which is really cool. So I've talked with a few of the guys, and they've mentioned like maybe wanting to get a bigger space in the future. It's not the most large space, but it's a pretty typical retail size space, plus the fact that it has a movie theater in the back. But the worst part is parking. They literally have like 2 parking spots allocated for this place, and they're always full. So you never can get a parking spot. You got to walk a ways, but what can you do? But it's a good spot. I'm probably going to go there tomorrow. And they do a subscription base, which I know we all love subscriptions. But this one's kind of nice. It's like $10 a month, and then you can rent however many movies that you want to rent, which I think is a cool concept. It kind of reminds me of like Movie Pass. You know, pay $10 a month, watch as many movies as you want. Same sort of thing. You can pay $10 a month and then watch as many movies as you want. I have not been a stranger to going in there basically once a week, if not more, and renting a movie. And you get all movies are a week-long rental, which is nice. But then it's so easy because you go back to drop off the movie, so then you just pick up another movie. Every time you go back and drop one off, you just pick up another one. It's fun. But yeah, I think that's probably going to bring us, I would guess, probably towards the end of this stream here. It's just about 8:30. Actually, funny enough, I guess I started this like almost right on the dot. But yeah, a couple things coming up in this month for this channel. We have a video for every week of this month. That's kind of the flagship video, and we are doing a Halloween themed video as well. So be on the lookout for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm probably going to do a live stream, as I was mentioning at the start of this stream. I'll probably do a live stream like maybe at least once a week through October, and just kind of see what the reception is, and like if you guys like this format. It certainly requires me to talk a lot more, but the benefit is I get to talk with you guys in more or less real time, and that's pretty cool. So If you guys are into it, I'm into it, and we can keep doing the live stream. But I'll do it for the next probably 4 weeks and see what the reception is. And then in November, I'm gonna do a video on shooting in black and white, which I was talking about before. Not something I do. I'm very color focused in my work, but I'm gonna shoot the Olympus E500 strictly in black and white for at least a couple weeks and kind of provide my experience to you guys, and also like what my take is as far as black and white files direct from the E500. So that'll be coming in November also, and then we'll be coming up on Christmas, and not long after Christmas the big gallery starts. So I am nearly done on all of the frames, all of the images I need to frame. I've got, I think, 3 more that I need to do out of the, what did I have? I had like 16 or 18 images. So I've got 2 or 3 more to do, and then we're done with that. The photo book has been printed and has been shipped, so it is on its way to me now. So I think at this point I've achieved all of my goals for 2024, which is awesome. And yeah, that's exciting. So those big things are coming. And of course, the gallery and the book will be topics that will be discussed thoroughly on the channel. But yeah, I think that's probably going to do it for me for today's stream. If you enjoy the stream, definitely give me a thumbs up. That definitely helps out. Hit the subscribe button if you're new to the channel. We post videos every week, if not a little more frequent than that. And if you're watching this video and it's not live, I know I already said it before, but throw your comments in. I'll go back and answer any questions that you guys have. That way, even if you didn't get to see it live, you can still participate just like everybody else. But yeah, otherwise, I think I'll plan on the next video is going to drop on Saturday. And then the next live stream will most likely be either Monday or Thursday, or possibly it could be both. So we'll see. Just saw someone threw a like in there. Appreciate that. But yeah, otherwise, I think that's probably going to do it for me. And a lot of good stuff coming up. So stay tuned. Thank you guys for watching this video. And if I don't see you on one of the other live streams before the end of Halloween, then have a great Halloween. It is the best time of the year, especially to be in Texas, because the weather is actually nice for about 2 weeks. And then it just gets cold. Goes from incredibly hot, goes from about 105 degrees to like 33 degrees in the span of 2 or 3 weeks. So I'm going to be thoroughly shooting these next few weeks here. So anyway, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one.